Welcome to MIA Media, the podcast that shines light on any media that's gone missing in action. I'm your host, Sunny, and today's quite an interesting topic. I'm sure you've heard of the mythological story of Mothman. Well, have you heard of the mythological movie that was in production? I say mythological because it's never going to see the light of day. It's an interesting story, however, including sketchy people, suspicions, and the Mafia. Yep, the Mafia. Without further ado, here's the weird and wacky story of how the Mafia stopped a Mothman movie. Just before I start, however, I'd like to give credit to Blame It on George for the idea, Matthew Terminology for some points, and the Lost Media Wiki for some information. So, what was the Mothman movie? Well, it was an independent 1997 film made by director Tug TenNapel. The film's plot followed an animator named Ellis Gladson living in the small town of West Virginia, Point Pleasant, where the origin of Mothman started. After his sighting of the mysterious Mothman, he tells the town about his findings, which results in Ellis becoming an outcast immediately because, let's be honest, a giant Birdman thing is not entirely what a sane person would describe when walking in the woods, right? However, with the help of Hudson, who reports seeing the Mothman in his earlier days, they try to prove the creature's existence. Throughout the film, they are followed by a man in black, Agent Fulmer, who also is on the hunt for the Mothman for a much darker purpose. It's not really described, however, I believe it's to experiment because, of course, that's what the government do because they're, a bit stupid in media, let's be honest. TenNapel got the idea for the film when he was working on illustrations for Urban Legends, where Mothman was mentioned and how TenNapel became intrigued with the creature and its story. The original budget for the movie was about $650,000, a decent amount for an indie film. However, without even starting the production, the budget dwindled to a mere $150,000. Wow, that is completely rude. The budget then dwindled even more to a measly $60,000. That is terrible for any movie production. Even an indie production needs way more than that. The result of these budget cuts meant that the filming had to be completed within 15 days, and supposedly 90% of TenNapel's crew was laid off without even the film starting. That just seems like a huge insult, a huge slap in the face. I'm so sorry, TenNapel. Post-production took much longer than intended. Meaning the film lost a few dates of release. The project was fueled by public donations, and let's be real, the public aren't very kind and giving, are they? Sneak previews were held in 1999 San Diego Comic-Con, and a trailer was revealed, but the film was not even finished and would never be completed. How are they showing a trailer for an unfinished film in Comic-Con? No idea. That seems a bit stupid to me. However, additional footage was planned to be recorded in February 2000, but this just would never happen. The music producer for the film, Gene Andrusco, sorry if I butchered your name, in the following March, however, unfortunately passed due to either a brain aneurysm or a heart attack. It's not really confirmed which one. But either way, the last update that the Mothman movie got was by a company called Bad Karma, who stated that the film was in its final editing stages. This was, however, definitely a lie. Although, TenNapel did try to splice together whatever footage they had and gathered to make something cohesive, which was also not released. So that's just a bit of a background as to why the Mothman movie was pretty much doomed from the start. I mean, the huge budget cuts, and just, everything just went completely wrong. So you can see why initially it wouldn't have been finished. It was in development hell for years. However, it really was not helped when the Mafia got involved. How did the Mafia get involved? Well, they don't show up until production, which I'm going to tell you about right now. When the team arrived at Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the locals were immediately apprehensive and seemed, a little off. They got strange looks, supposedly, whenever they walked around town, and people were just really shy to talk to them. They all just seemed to kind of keep their distance in a weird way. One time, when the crew was filming in a diner, they'd asked some of the locals if they wanted to be background filler characters, to which some people coldly refused. I'm assuming this means, they just straight up denied, just said, no, go away. And things only got worse. Soon after film started, the cast were getting anonymous phone calls from the hotel they were staying at, threatening them to leave Point Pleasant via letters sent. TenNapel had to apparently change his home phone number from California multiple times, as whoever was making these threats were also calling his home phone to his wife, making these threats. Now, if that's not enough to get you out of Point Pleasant, I don't know what is. But for some odd reason, the crew continued. They were really dedicated to making this Mothman movie, apparently. These threats were occurring for two main reasons, but they connected to one main reason, which was Point Pleasant's local mafia, which sounds a little silly, a small town in West Virginia having a mafia. These threats were made and directed at the crew because they captured something on film. Well, they captured multiple things, but there's two kind of main things they captured on film. One of the technicians on set noticed something strange about the locations they were filming in. They had these certain gambling machines, And if you know, around the time when this filming started in 1997, West Virginia banned gambling. It was illegal completely. And these machines were everywhere in the most odd places, such as supermarkets and just, weird kind of places where you wouldn't normally see a gambling machine. Of course, these machines were the doing of the local mafia, and they did not really appreciate having their illegal gambling machines shown in film. Of course you wouldn't. Another reason the threats were happening was due to the crew filming in another very classified area, because of course they did, just to anger the mafia just a little bit more. When in the woods filming a certain scene, probably the sighting of Mothman itself, the crew may have potentially filmed where the gambling money was made, which, of course, was a weed field. They grew their illegal substances in the middle of the woods, and of course, the crew just happened to stumble across it. So of course, this money was used for the gambling machines, the illegal gambling machines too, across West Virginia, and showing where the money was made just didn't sit well with the mafia members, because of course it wouldn't. Eventually, the threats and challenges with production just got too much for the crew, and they wrapped up as soon as they could and left promptly. One of the crew members told a story of filming, saying that one night in the woods, an armed man approached them. They were described as nice, however, or at least not hostile, but it's theorised that this armed man was a part of the local mafia who may have sent to ward off the crew, or worse, kill them. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly recap what I've just said this entire podcast episode. There was a Mothman film in production in 1997 by TenNapel. It got into trouble off the bat with budget cuts, false promises, all that junk. Then during production, when they went to West Virginia, they got into trouble with the mafia by recording illegal gambling machines that were used to gamble money made by a weed farm that they had also captured on film. Quite a lot to process, isn't it? So does this mean there's going to be no Mothman movie in the future? No. Different director, definitely. But there's probably already countless films of mythological creatures in them. Mothman doesn't seem unlikely. Yeah, but wow, what a just insane turn of events for poor TenNapel. Anyway, with the theme of preservation, I'd like to do a quick little blooper reel. 1, to humble myself as a host. 2, like I said, so I don't lose it, because it's quite funny. And then, number 3, just because, why not? Anyway, here's the blooper reel for this episode. Wow, what an amazing host I am. Anyway, that's going to end this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Tune in next week for next Lost Media Missing in Action. I was your host, Sunny. Thank you so much again. Bye-bye.